young boy from a quiet town in northwest Canada disappeared during a youth soccer game, leaving behind a silence his family never truly recovered from. For 4 long years, his parents carried that emptiness, until one unexpected moment changed everything. Inside a locker at the soccer field, the boy's father made a discovery that stopped him cold. It had been a damp, gray afternoon in Riverview Hollow, the kind that settles into the pine trees and hangs heavy in the air. The rain had eased, but the smell of wet soil lingered. This corner of the Pacific Northwest was a place where the old rubbed shoulders with the new, century-old homes sitting beside fresh suburban builds. For Reynold Mercer, though, the town was more than streets and scenery. It was memory. It was grief. It was where his son Aiden had vanished without a trace during what should have been just another soccer match. Now Reynold coached the very same team. Every practice, every cheer, every scraped knee echoed with what was lost. But today was different. His team had just won a local tournament, and for the first time in a while, Reynold felt something like real happiness. "All right, boys, circle up," he called, his voice full of warmth. The kids, flushed from their victory, ran over in red and white jackets marked with the town's crest, mud-stained from the game. "That was an incredible performance," Reynold said, scanning their eager faces. "You gave it everything, and I couldn't be prouder." Cheers and laughter erupted. "To celebrate," he added, "how about a cookout at my place? Burgers, hot dogs, the whole deal." The boys lit up, instantly buzzing about who could eat the most. But next to him, Coach Derek, calm, methodical, cleared his throat. "Reynold," he said gently, "this might be a bit sudden. Some parents may not be on board with short notice. And," he glanced at the sky, "weather's turning." Reynold gave a casual wave. "No problem. I'll call the parents myself. Or we ditch the grill and just do pizza. My treat." The kids were still excited, but Derek shook his head. "I've already got plans tonight. Why not do something tomorrow? It's Saturday, easier for everyone." Reynold paused. He didn't want to dim the joy of the win, but he knew Derek was right. The clouds were getting darker, and the energy had dipped just a little. "You're right," he finally said. "Tomorrow it is. Full cookout. We'll get all the good stuff." The boys nodded, not thrilled, but understanding. "But hey," Reynold added, trying to bring back the mood, "let's not end the celebration just yet. How about we hit Rosie's Diner for milkshakes? My treat." That got a fresh round of grins as the kids started grabbing their gear, already debating milkshake flavors. Reynolds' phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced down. His wife, Sarah, probably calling to check in. "Hang tight, everyone," he said, stepping aside. "Hey, Sarah, everything okay?" Her voice came through shaky, equal parts nervous and hopeful. "Reynold, the police just called. They found something." The moment Reynold heard the words, "They have an update on Aiden's case," his entire world shifted. After 4 years of silence, 4 years of unanswered questions, and hope slowly draining away, those few words hit like a bolt of lightning. "An update?" His voice came out hoarse, almost inaudible. "What kind of update?" he asked, holding his breath. Sarah's voice trembled on the line. Someone thinks they saw him, yesterday, in a town called Cedar Ridge. It's about 3 hours from here. The police want us to come in. They have footage they want us to see. Cedar Ridge, a place that meant nothing to him, until now. Now, it carried a weight that made it hard to breathe. "Okay," he said, heart racing. "I'm on my way. I'll meet you there." He hung up without another word. The energy from the tournament win, the BBQ plans, the milkshakes, it all faded. Just noise in the background of something that suddenly mattered much more. Reynold turned back to the team. His face had gone pale. Derek and the boys could see the shift instantly. "Guys," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "I'm so sorry, but I have to leave. The police, they have a new lead on Aiden. The chatter stopped. Even the youngest players understood what that meant. Every kid on that field had grown up hearing whispers about Coach Reynolds' missing son. Now those whispers had turned into something real. Derek gave him a slow, understanding nod. Go. I'll take the boys to get milkshakes. You just focus on whatever's coming next. Reynolds offered a grateful look, but hesitated. One thing, did you already pay the ref? In this league, Reynolds explained to no one in particular, we usually pay the officials directly. Small league, simple system. Derek shook his head. Not yet. I'll handle it, Reynolds replied. I'll just grab the team cash from the locker before I go. Derek paused, then reached into his pocket. Actually, let me do it. You've got more important things to think about. No, really. It'll just take a second. I need to grab my change of clothes anyway. Reynolds' voice was firm, already halfway across the field in his mind. With a bit of reluctance, Derek handed him a key on a worn lanyard. Here, I thought I still had some of my stuff in there, but I guess I moved it. Reynolds took the key. That small, odd comment lingered for a second, but his focus was already gone. The possibility that his son was out there somewhere had eclipsed everything. He made his way into the corridor behind the field, cool, dim, and quiet compared to the chatter outside. His footsteps echoed as he walked toward the locker room, each step pounding with urgency. The metal locker clicked open, revealing the usual clutter: spare jerseys, water bottles, a first aid kit, and the familiar scent of sweat and old liniment. He scanned the shelf. There it was, the envelope with the ref's payment, partially tucked under Derek's jacket and backpack. As Reynolds reached in, a small folded piece of paper fell out from the jacket's lining. He picked it up without thinking, planning to put it back. But a few words, clear and sharp in bold black ink, caught his eye. His casual glance turned into a hard stare. Something about it didn't make sense. Something was wrong. The receipt was nothing special at first glance, just a slip from a local general store. But as Reynolds scanned the list of purchased items, his breath caught in his throat. 12 packs of strawberry pinwheel hard candies, 1 level 5 graph puzzle book, a child-sized thermal blanket. It hit him like a punch to the chest. Strawberry pinwheels, Aiden's absolute favorite. He used to keep a few tucked in his pockets all the time. The puzzle book, level 5, wasn't just a coincidence. That exact difficulty level was Aiden's go-to. Anything lower's too easy, Dad, he'd once said with a grin. And a child-sized blanket? Why would Derek, single, no kids, no young family, buy something like that? Reynolds' mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe Derek had a godchild he'd never mentioned. Maybe it was for a donation drive. But the combination, the candy, the puzzle book, the blanket, was just too specific, too close. His hand tightened around the slip of paper. Nausea swelled in his chest. He couldn't put it back now, not with what he'd just seen. Quietly, Reynolds folded the receipt and tucked it into his pocket, the sound of paper loud in the stillness of the locker room. He closed the locker door, its soft metallic click louder than it should have been, and turned toward his own locker. His hands were trembling as he dialed the combination. He grabbed a t-shirt, jeans, and his bag, nearly dropping his keys in the process. His thoughts were no longer on the police station alone. Now they were split, half fixed on the lead in Cedar Ridge, the other on the disturbing truth that might be hiding in plain sight. Back on the field, the energy had shifted. Derek was trying to wrangle the restless boys, but the joy from earlier had dimmed. Reynolds approached, doing his best to hide the storm inside. Here's the key, he said, handing it back without a word about what he'd found. Got everything? Derek asked, eyeing the change of clothes. Yeah, Reynolds said, barely hearing his own voice. He turned to the team. You guys were amazing today. I'm proud of you. I have to run now, but celebrate properly, all right? He paid the referee, the interaction passing in a blur. Then he made his way to the exit. Each step felt heavier, the sky now beginning to cry above them. Thunder rolled low in the distance. Rain pattered against the pavement and the roof of his car as he climbed inside. As the engine started, he looked back at the complex, his windshield streaked with falling water. A thought crept in. Would Derek really take the kids out in this weather? Probably not. And for some reason, that gave Reynold a strange sense of relief. He didn't think he could face the boys again today, not with this gnawing suspicion growing inside him. The drive to the police station passed in a haze, wet roads, blurry streetlights, and the steady rhythm of the wipers. His mind was racing between two storms, the terrifying hope sparked by the call from Cedar Ridge, and the haunting puzzle that had just landed in his lap. When he arrived at the station, a plain gray building that had become all too familiar over the years, Detective Miller met him at the door. Miller had been with the case since day one. His face was steady, but it carried the same tired sympathy Reynold had seen too many times before. "Thanks for coming, Reynold," the detective said, calm and professional. "Sarah's already here. We're set up in one of the interview rooms." Reynold nodded silently and followed him through the narrow halls. Inside the small, windowless room, Sarah was waiting. Her face was pale, eyes wide, hands clasped tightly. When she saw him, she reached out and held his hand. It grounded him for a second. Detective Miller sat across from them. "This morning," he began, "we got a call from a woman in Cedar Ridge. She works at a florist's shop there. Yesterday afternoon, she believes she saw a boy who matches Aiden's description." Reynold leaned in, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. What exactly did she see? Detective Miller nodded, glancing at his notes. She said a man and a young boy, both in raincoats, walked past her flower shop and into the general store next door. She'd seen one of Aiden's flyers we circulated in that area some time ago, and something about the boy's posture, the way he moved. It caught her attention. At first, she wasn't sure, which is why she didn't report it right away. But this morning, she spoke with the general store's owner. Turns out, he saw them too. Said the boy looked familiar, though he couldn't quite place him. Miller turned the laptop toward them. The store had a camera. Not great resolution, and the angle's not ideal, but we pulled a short clip. He paused. "Just know, it's brief, and the raincoats obscure most of the faces." He clicked play. The footage rolled. A wet street, a shop window. Then, two figures. One tall, one smaller. They moved quickly. The man's head was lowered beneath a pulled-up hood. The boy, also hooded, stayed close, shielded by the man's frame. For a second, barely more than a blink, the boy's face tilted up, a pale flash, a glimpse of light hair. Then they disappeared into the store. The video looped. Reynolds stared, breath locked in his chest. Beside him, Sarah let out a quiet, involuntary sob. It was him. Maybe. The build, the height, they matched what Aiden would look like now at 14. But it wasn't enough. The footage was too unclear. The shadows, the rain, the angle. It blurred every detail. "Can you confirm anything?" Miller asked gently. Reynolds slowly shook his head. I wish I could. It could be him, but I can't say for sure." Sarah echoed the same. "There's something about him, but it's just too blurry." Miller nodded. "We get it. The local sheriff's office is working on it. They're checking records, talking to people in the area. If anyone recognizes them, we'll know." But Reynolds had heard versions of this before. So many leads, so many maybes, and just as many dead ends. He reached into his pocket, fingers tightening around the receipt, the one he couldn't stop thinking about. "Officer Miller," he said slowly, "what was the name of that general store in the footage?" Miller glanced at his clipboard. "Cedar Creek Emporium. Small place, carries a bit of everything." Reynolds unfolded the receipt. His eyes went straight to the top. Pine Valley Goods and Groceries. Not the same store. And the date? A week earlier. A quiet pressure deflated inside him. His stomach sank. "It's not the same store," he murmured. Miller noticed the receipt in his hand. "What's that?" Reynolds hesitated. "I found it earlier today, in the team locker. It caught my eye. The items." He smoothed it on the table. Sarah leaned in. Her hand flew to her mouth. 12 packs of strawberry pinwheel candy, a level 5 puzzle book, a child-sized thermal blanket. Miller scanned it. "Pine Valley Goods and Groceries," he read aloud. "That's also in Cedar Ridge, but not the store from the footage. And it's from last week. Could be unrelated." He paused. "That puzzle series, it's pretty common now. We've seen it often." Reynolds nodded slowly. "But Aiden, he was obsessed. He'd wait for the new one to come out every second Tuesday of the month. Same series, same level, every time." Miller handed the receipt back. "We're following up on both leads," he said gently. "We'll keep you posted." But the room felt heavier now. Hope had flickered and faded. A few minutes later, Reynolds and Sarah stepped outside. The rain had intensified, pounding against the pavement like a slow drum. The sky was a deep, endless gray. "You should go home, get some rest," Sarah said softly. Her voice was flat, tired. Reynolds nodded, but something held him back. "I think I'll check on the team first," he said quietly. His mind wasn't done turning. Not yet. "I'll catch up with you later," Reynolds told Sarah, his voice softer now. "Just need to clear my head a bit." She didn't protest, just nodded, gave him a brief, weary hug, and walked toward her car, her figure folding into the storm. Reynolds stood there a moment longer, the rain soaking into his jacket, the weight of the receipt still pressing against his chest like an anchor. Something about it kept pulling him down, deep into a place he wasn't ready to go. Back in his car, the air inside was cool, carrying that damp, familiar scent of old upholstery. The windshield blurred with rain, the outside world reduced to shapes and reflections. He glanced at the clock, just over an hour since he'd left the boys. 1 hour, but it felt like days. He wondered, had Derek actually gone through with the milkshake plan? The rain had only gotten worse. Still, Rosie's Diner was their usual victory stop, a retro place with checkered floors, chrome booths, and famously oversized shakes. Maybe they were still there. He dialed Derek's number. Voicemail. Again. Strange. Derek wasn't the chatty type, but he usually picked up. Reynolds started the car and pulled away from the station, heading toward Rosie's. His thoughts kept circling back to that slip of paper, the same strawberry candies Aiden loved, that specific puzzle book series, a child-sized thermal blanket. Why would Derek buy those? The man had no kids, never mentioned family. He was always about discipline, order, drills, definitely not snacks or games. And why Cedar Ridge, a town 3 hours away, when every store in Riverview Hollow carried similar items? He tried to think of some explanation. Maybe Derek was visiting a friend with kids. Maybe he was donating supplies somewhere. But the date on the receipt? A Tuesday morning. Reynolds remembered it clearly. They had practice that evening. Derek was there, on time, focused. Had he made a 6-hour round trip that same day to buy candy and a puzzle book? It made no sense. Still, this was Derek, his colleague, a man he'd coached alongside for years. Trusted, respected, a man the kids might not have adored, but certainly looked up to. Was it fair? Was it even right to let a single receipt spark all this unease? Reynolds sighed. Maybe he was chasing shadows. Maybe his mind, starved for answers, was turning molehills into mountains. As he neared Rosie's Diner, he slowed. The neon sign glowed faintly through the downpour. He pulled across the street and parked, scanning the bright interior through the rain-slicked windows. No red and white team jackets, no cluster of boys at the booths, just a few quiet patrons, older couples, someone reading a paper, and then Derek, He appeared suddenly, exiting the diner in a rush, hunched under the weight of the storm. He wasn't alone, but not in the way Reynolds expected. There were no kids with him. Just a large takeaway bag in one hand and a tray loaded with milkshake cups in the other. Reynolds' heart sank. He rolled his window down, just a crack. Rain splashed his face instantly. "Derek!" he shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the wind and the pounding rain. Derek didn't look back. He reached his sedan, fumbled with the keys, and slipped inside, tossing the food bag and tray onto the passenger seat. Reynolds quickly called him again. Straight to voicemail, and then he watched as Derek started the engine. Derek's headlights cut through the murk as he pulled away from the diner, merging onto the rain-slicked street. That's when Reynolds saw it. Something off about the front passenger side tire. It sagged slightly, the rubber bulging near the bottom. In this weather, that was dangerous. All suspicions were momentarily overridden by instinctive concern. He can't drive like that. Not tonight. Without thinking, Reynolds made a quick U-turn across the wet road, earning a sharp honk from a passing car. He sped up, catching up to Derek's vehicle, and tried calling again. Voicemail. Frustrated, he flashed his headlights and gave a few light taps of the horn, enough to get Derek's attention without startling him. A moment later, Derek's right blinker came on. He was pulling over. Reynolds exhaled and followed suit, stopping a few feet behind him. The rain was now a full-on downpour, driven sideways by wind. Both men stepped out into the storm, hoods up, clothes already soaking. "Derek!" Reynolds shouted through the rain. "Your front tire, it's low. That thing's not safe, especially on these roads." Derek glanced down at the tire, then back at him. His reaction was oddly casual. "Oh yeah, thought something felt off. Thanks." "I saw you leaving Rosie's," Reynolds said, shouting to be heard. "I figured I'd swing by. I thought you were still there with the kids." "Nah," Derek replied, brushing water from his face. "The parents took them straight home. Weather turned too nasty." He waved vaguely toward the tire. "It's probably just low. I'll make it home." "You sure?" Reynolds pressed. "Do you have a spare? I can help change it." Derek hesitated, then gave a half shrug. "Yeah, let's check." He walked to the trunk and popped it open. Inside was a mess. Jumper cables, cones, a folded blanket, old papers. And in the middle of the clutter was the spare tire. They both stared at it. The rubber was cracked, faded, and just as soft as the one on the car. "Useless," Derek muttered, frustrated, and shoved it back in. But Reynolds wasn't looking at the spare anymore. His eyes had landed on something else, something that stopped him cold. A hoodie, child-sized, faded navy blue with a skateboarding logo on the front. It looked exactly like the one Aiden used to wear, nearly every day. For a split second, Reynolds froze. Questions slammed into his chest, but Derek, seemingly unaware, was already closing the trunk. "Derek!" Reynolds said, his voice rising above the wind. "You shouldn't drive like this. Let me give you a ride. We'll call roadside assistance from my place." Derek hesitated, visibly torn, then shook his head. "Nah, I'll be fine. Just gotta take it slow." Reynolds wasn't buying it. "Then at least let me follow you, just until you get home. With that tire in this rain, I'd feel better knowing you got there safe." Derek looked at him, eyes unreadable. Surprise? Irritation? It was hard to tell. Finally, he gave a slight nod. "If you insist, thanks." Soaked to the bone, they both climbed back into their vehicles. Derek pulled back onto the road, inching forward cautiously. Reynolds followed close behind, his grip tight on the wheel, heart pounding, not just from the rain or the road conditions, but from what he'd seen. That hoodie, that receipt, the two images now tangled together in his mind. The drive dragged on. Visibility was nearly gone. Derek's car crept along, hazard lights blinking through the sheets of water. Reynolds stayed close, eyes locked on his taillights, navigating the winding road as it pulled them farther from familiar streets and deeper into a silence that felt anything but ordinary. The road began to thin as they left the heart of Riverview Hollow behind, transitioning into the more secluded outskirts of town, a quiet, semi-rural stretch lined with older properties set far back from the road. The landscape grew darker, more shadowed, as the forest thickened around them and the homes grew fewer and farther between. After nearly 20 minutes, Derek's turn signal blinked. He turned off the main road onto a long, uneven driveway lined with rain-soaked trees and tangled brush. Reynolds followed cautiously, his tires bouncing slightly over the ruts and gravel. At the end of the drive, the trees gave way to a clearing. There, in the middle of the open space, stood a large, weathered two-story house. Paint peeled from its wooden siding, and ivy crept up one of the corners. It looked like it had once been grand, but time had taken its toll. Derek pulled up near the porch and turned off the engine. Reynolds parked next to him. Despite the tire, despite the weather, they'd made it. Derek stepped out and stretched his back. "Well, we're here," he said with a tired smile. "Appreciate you tailing me, Reynolds. Really?" Then he motioned toward the front door. "Come in, warm up. I picked up a bunch of food from Rosie's. Figured I'd stock the fridge. Perks of being a bachelor, I guess. No one to cook for me, so I make do." Reynolds hesitated. He was cold, soaked, and eager to talk to Sarah, but the day had raised too many questions to ignore. He couldn't let this moment pass. "You picked up drinks too, right?" Reynolds asked, trying to sound casual. "Looked like 4 milkshakes in that tray." Derek nodded easily. "Yeah, gotta keep the protein up," he chuckled. "Plus, I like having options." He pushed the door open. "Seriously, come in, have a bite. Least I can do." Reynolds hesitated, then gave a polite nod. "All right, but just for a bit." As they walked toward the house, Reynolds looked around the property. "You know, I don't think I've ever actually been out here," he said, his tone curious. "Didn't realize you had this much land." Derek unlocked the front door, replying, "Family home. Been in the Maddox line for generations. A bit isolated, which is probably why I don't do much hosting. I'd rather meet people in town." Reynolds' gaze shifted, following something Derek had only glanced at, but just for a second. Off to the side of the house, past the soggy yard, stood a dilapidated barn, and next to it, half concealed in the mist, was a large metal container. It looked like a modified shipping unit, fitted with a door that didn't match the rest. "That yours too?" Reynolds asked, gesturing. Derek nodded. "Yeah, the barn's my grandfather's, mostly full of junk now, old tools and rusted gear. I moved a lot of it into that storage container when I inherited the place. Bought it years ago." Then, without pause, he redirected the conversation. "You sure you don't want some food? Got burgers, fries, the works?" They'd reached the front porch now. Reynolds stopped, the idea of sitting inside suddenly unbearable. There were too many loose threads in his mind, too many questions circling. "Honestly, Derek, I should head back," he said. "Sarah's waiting, and I still need to talk to her about that possible sighting in Cedar Ridge." He explained briefly about the blurry footage, the boy in the raincoat, the fleeting glimpse that had left them with more questions than answers. But before he could leave, he had to ask. "Derek," he said slowly, his voice level but firm, "there's something else. Earlier today, in the locker room, I went to get the cash for the ref, and a receipt fell out of your jacket." He reached into his pocket and unfolded the now wrinkled slip. "I wasn't trying to snoop, but I couldn't ignore this." He held it out. "Strawberry pinwheel candies, a level 5 puzzle book, a child-sized thermal blanket. These aren't just any items. These were Aiden's favorites, all of them." He looked Derek in the eye. "I just need to ask, why did you buy those?" There was no dramatic outburst, no denial, just a flicker, barely visible, but Reynolds saw it. A momentary tension in Derek's jaw, a glint of surprise, or was it fear? Then the mask returned. But for Reynolds, that single flicker was enough to freeze the air between them. For a brief moment, Derek's expression slipped, just enough for Reynolds to catch a flicker of something, before the calm, unreadable mask returned. His eyes dropped to the receipt in Reynolds' hand. The wind whistled through the corners of the old house, rain still hammering the steps between them. "Oh, that," Derek finally said, a little too lightly. "That was for a friend's kid. I was out in Cedar Ridge visiting them last week. The kid loves those candies, and he's really into puzzle books. His mom mentioned he gets cold a lot and asked if I could grab a blanket while I was at the store." He shrugged, casual. "Just doing a favor." Reynolds studied his face, watching for cracks, but Derek looked composed, calm. His story sounded reasonable, too reasonable. Reynolds felt a wave of guilt rise in his chest. What am I doing? He'd let the day get to him, let grief distort the way he looked at a friend. "Oh," he said, folding the receipt and slipping it back into his pocket. "I'm sorry, Derek. I shouldn't have assumed anything. It's just, those were Aiden's favorites, and it just hit me." "No hard feelings," Derek replied, voice softer now. "I can't imagine how hard it must be. Every little thing probably brings it all back." The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unspoken. "Well," Reynolds said, forcing a polite tone, "if you need help with that tire tomorrow, just give me a call." Derek shook his head quickly. "No need. I'll get it handled." Reynolds was about to say goodbye when another image pushed its way into his mind, the hoodie in Derek's trunk. "Actually, one more thing," he added. "I hope I'm not overstepping again, but earlier when you opened your trunk, I thought I saw a hoodie, a navy one. Looked familiar, like something Aiden used to wear." This time, Derek's reaction was sharper. A pause. Eyes flicked away, then back. His jaw tightened. "A hoodie?" he echoed. Then after a beat, "Oh, yeah, that's from one of the boys on the team years back. Must have left it in my car after a game. I meant to return it, but you know how it is. He moved or aged out, been in there ever since." He gave a short, hollow laugh. "Guess I forgot about it." Reynolds didn't respond right away. The explanation felt thinner than before, less sure, but he'd already pushed the line. There was nowhere to go without crossing into outright accusation. Derek was quick to steer things toward an ending. "Look, you should get going. This storm's only getting worse, and you don't want to get stuck out here." Reynolds nodded slowly. "Yeah, you're right." He stepped back from the porch. "Thanks again, for everything." Derek gave a simple nod. "Drive safe," he said, then turned and disappeared into the house, closing the door behind him. Reynolds stood in the rain for a moment, the sounds of the storm wrapping around him. Then he turned and walked to his car, his thoughts spinning. Part of him felt ridiculous, ashamed even, for letting his imagination run wild. Derek's explanations had been logical, harmless. Aiden was missing. Not Derek's fault, and there was a real lead to focus on, one that the police were actively investigating. He shouldn't be chasing shadows. The engine hummed to life as he climbed inside. It broke the silence like a sudden jolt. Reynolds shifted into reverse, headlights cutting through the downpour as he backed down the driveway. The trees on either side seemed to press in, their branches skeletal and reaching in the gloom. As he neared the end of the long drive, he hesitated. He wasn't entirely sure how to get back home from here. He pulled to the side just beyond the property line, his car partially hidden by tall rhododendrons and a wide cedar tree. The rain drummed on the roof, steady and unrelenting. He pulled out his phone, opening the GPS, just as it buzzed with an incoming call. Sarah. "Reynolds? Where are you? Are you okay?" Her voice was tight with worry. "I'm okay," he said. "I was just at Derek's. His tire was in bad shape, so I followed him home. I'm about to head back now. just figuring out the route. But as he spoke, his eyes drifted across the shadowed yard, back toward the metal container beside the old barn. It stood there, silent, heavy, out of place, and suddenly, everything in Reynolds' chest went still. Beside the weather-worn barn, Reynolds' gaze locked onto something, small but unmistakable. A faint red light, blinking, just above the modified door of the storage unit. Once, then again. It wasn't random. There was a rhythm. "Reynold, are you there?" Sarah's voice on the phone sounded distant now, like it was coming from a different world. He didn't respond. His focus narrowed to that single point of red in the dark. The pattern continued. Long, short, long, pause, short, 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 pause. A memory clicked to life, something buried deep. He knew Morse code, a long-forgotten skill from his time in the Army Reserves. The message was clear. "I am hungry. I'm hungry," over and over again, blinking into the night. The cold that washed over Reynolds wasn't from the rain. It was dread, pure and absolute. His breath caught as the full meaning hit him. This wasn't an accident. Someone was inside that container, sending a message, a plea. And then, as if the moment were scripted, the front door of Derek's house creaked open. Warm yellow light spilled out into the storm. Derek stepped out, silhouetted in the frame. He was holding a takeaway box and one of the milkshake cups Reynolds had seen earlier. But instead of heading toward the house, he walked across the muddy lawn, directly to the container. Reynolds didn't move. He stayed hidden in the shadows beyond the driveway, partially concealed by the trees. Derek reached the container door, bent down, unlocked something, maybe a keypad, maybe a heavy latch, and slowly rolled the steel door open. With a low groan, the door slid up. He stepped inside and vanished. It all clicked into place. The receipt with Aiden's favorite items, the blanket, the puzzle book, the hoodie, the multiple drinks, the isolated property, the reinforced container. Reynolds' mind reeled. It couldn't be. It shouldn't be. But every part of him now screamed that it was. On the phone, Sarah's voice broke through again, urgent, anxious. "Ray, what's going on? Talk to me." His voice came out hollow. "Sarah, I'll call you back. I promise." He hung up, fingers trembling, heart pounding. Without wasting a second, he dialed 911, then quickly switched to Officer Miller's number from earlier, hoping to skip protocol. 2 rings. "Miller!" the voice came, calm but alert. "Officer, it's Reynolds Mercer. I'm at Derek Maddox's property. No, I know. Someone's in that storage container. I saw a light signal, Morse code. It said, 'I'm hungry.' Then Derek brought food there. A takeaway box, a drink, and he went inside." A pause on the other end. Then, "Are you absolutely sure?" "I don't know if it's Aiden," Reynolds said, the words nearly tearing him apart. "But someone's in there, and they're not there by choice." "Okay, Reynolds. Stay exactly where you are. Do not engage. We're sending a unit now. Give me the address. Again." He recited the address with shaking breath. Miller confirmed help was minutes away. Reynolds hung up. The red light had stopped blinking. Derek was still inside. The wait stretched, longer than it should have. Every second carved deeper into Reynolds' chest. He couldn't stop picturing what might be inside that container. A child? More than one? Aiden? His thoughts spiraled, and then, finally, the distant flicker of blue and red lights cut through the storm. 2 cruisers, sirens off, silent approach. They turned down the gravel drive, rolling to a stop beside Reynolds' vehicle. Officer Miller was first out, his expression unreadable but focused. Another officer flanked him, both in rain gear, both ready. "Reynolds," Miller said, voice low and firm. "Show us." Reynolds pointed across the lawn, his hand visibly shaking. He went in there, with food, About 10 minutes ago. Miller nodded. You stay with Officer Davies, he instructed, gesturing to another officer now moving into position. We'll take it from here. No, Reynolds said suddenly, his voice hoarse. This is my colleague's property, and if it's Aiden, if it's any child, I have to be there. I need to be there. He knew the risk of interfering. He knew protocol, but he also knew something else now. Something he couldn't explain away. Something he couldn't unsee. If Reynolds was wrong, if this was all just a terrible misjudgment, then everything would fall apart. His friendship with Derek would be ruined. His reputation, his judgment, maybe even his role in the community, all brought into question. But if he was right, if any child was in that container, he had no choice. He had to see it through. Officer Miller looked him in the eye, then gave a sharp nod. All right, but you stay behind us. No sudden moves. You let us handle it. Understood? Reynolds nodded. His throat felt like sandpaper. The three officers moved forward across the soaked lawn, flashlights slicing through the rain. Reynolds followed behind, his heart pounding so violently he could barely hear anything else. When they reached the container, Officer Miller signaled for silence. Then he knocked, hard. Police, Mr. Maddox, open the door. Nothing. Only the wind and rain answered. Miller knocked again, louder. Derek Maddox, police. Open up. There was a pause. Then, slowly, the metal door began to roll upward with a grinding sound. Dim light spilled out. Derek stood just inside, blinking against the flashlights now aimed in his direction. His face was tight with confusion, or the appearance of it. What the hell is going on? He demanded. Officers? Reynolds? What is this? Mr. Maddox, Miller said evenly, we've received a report that someone may be being held in this unit. We need to take a look inside. Derek's eyes shot toward Reynolds. His confusion curdled into something else, a tight, incredulous sneer. Held? Are you serious? There's no one here but me. He stepped aside and waved one hand toward the interior. Go ahead, check it. It's just storage. Two officers moved past him, flashlights scanning the space. It was cluttered with old chairs, boxes, tools, dusty tarps. After a few minutes, they turned back. No one was there. Reynolds felt his chest sink. Was I wrong? Had he misread the signal? Let his desperation twist something innocent? Derek folded his arms, a smug glint in his eye. Told you. Empty. But Reynolds didn't back down. I saw the light. Morse code. And I saw you carry food in here. Where is it? The officers looked to Derek again. He shrugged. I eat out here sometimes. Helps me focus when I'm sorting through the old stuff. You know my tire was flat. I just took a break. But something didn't add up. Reynolds scanned the space. No takeout box, no milkshake cups, no wrappers, nothing. And then his eyes landed on something. A worn carpet, partially tucked under a pile of crates. The edges were frayed, recently disturbed, like it had been moved, often. What's under that? He asked. One of the officers stepped forward, shifted the crates, and peeled the carpet back. A trap door, set flush with the concrete, fitted with a recessed metal handle. Color drained from Derek's face. It's just an old root cellar. It's sealed. Been that way for years. But the scuff marks told another story, fresh. Officer Miller gave a quiet order. One of the officers crouched down, lifted the hatch. It creaked open. A dark passage stretched below, tight and musty. The air changed. Everything changed. Two officers readied themselves and began to descend with flashlights. Reynolds held his breath. Every second was unbearable. Then, movement below. A voice. We've got him. There's a boy. He's alive. The world tilted. Reynolds staggered. Officer Davies caught his arm as he nearly collapsed. Moments later, One of the officers emerged. Behind him, another, gently guiding a pale, thin figure up the steps. A boy, eyes wide, face dirty, bones visible beneath his soaked clothes, but even through the grime and fear and weight of time, it was Aiden. Reynold gasped. A strangled cry broke from his throat. His son, alive, the officers explained. The tunnel led to a concealed underground room, likely once a survival shelter, now insulated, modified, turned into a holding cell. Soundproof walls, a disguised vent shaft, power running from a buried generator. As they spoke, Derek's composure shattered. He began yelling, rage spilling out in broken sentences. "You didn't deserve him! Your perfect life! Your perfect son!" Officers moved fast, restraining him, cuffing him as he screamed. He was placed under arrest. Moments later, paramedics arrived. Aiden, shivering, fragile, barely able to speak, was carried toward the waiting ambulance. And as they crossed the threshold of the storage unit, he turned, eyes still adjusting to the light, and found his father. Aiden's eyes, wide with confusion, locked onto Reynold, who stood frozen beside the ambulance. There was recognition, but also something else. "Dad?" Aiden's voice cracked, hoarse from silence or emotion. He took a trembling step forward and began to cry. Not from relief, but from something far more painful. You're supposed to be dead," he whispered. Reynolds' heart shattered. "What?" he asked, kneeling, reaching out. "Aiden, no. What are you saying?" "Coach Derek. He told me," Aiden sobbed. "He said you and Mom and all my friends from the team were killed in a shooting right after the tournament. He said he saved me, that bad people were still looking for me, and I had to stay hidden or they'd come back to finish the job." Reynolds' tears were falling now. "No, son. That's not true. There was no shooting. No one was after you. We've been looking for you every single day for 4 years. Your mom and I, we never gave up." Aiden stared, struggling to understand. "So, no one's hunting me? I'm not in danger?" Reynolds shook his head. "No, sweetheart. You were never in danger. Not from anyone, but him." There was a pause. Then Aiden said quietly, "He didn't keep me locked up all the time. Sometimes, once a week, he'd let me come upstairs or go outside in disguise. He said if I behaved, I could have puzzle books, candy. He gave me food if I followed all the rules." A paramedic gently approached Reynold. "Sir, we need to examine him now. Get him to the ER." As the medic began checking Aiden, Reynold noticed him flinching at certain touches. Then, in a barely audible voice, Aiden said something was hurting in a private area. The medic's expression changed immediately. Just then, a detective arrived, crouching down to Aiden's level. "Can you tell us," he asked gently, "what Mr. Maddox did while you were with him?" Aiden hesitated. And then, haltingly, he spoke. He described fitness checks Derek conducted. He spoke of touching that didn't feel right. He didn't understand at first. He'd been so young. Derek said it was normal. Said it was professional. And slowly, everything Derek had done began to surface. The manipulation, the threats, the grooming that had started before Aiden disappeared. The paramedic looked at Reynold, his voice firm but kind. "We're taking him to the hospital now. He'll need a full exam. There are signs of prolonged trauma. We believe he's been hurt badly." Reynold could barely breathe. He watched, numb with horror, as his son was gently lifted into the ambulance. Then he climbed in after him, leaving behind the flashing lights and the forensic team beginning their grim work at Derek's house. Riverview General Hospital felt like a different planet. Bright, sterile, still. Aiden was rushed to the ER. Reynold called Sarah from the back of the ambulance. His voice cracked as he said the words. "He's alive. We found him. Aiden's alive." Sarah arrived minutes later, running inside in a daze, her face a mask of disbelief, relief, and rage. As Reynold tried to explain what little he knew, she collapsed into him, sobbing. "All this time," she whispered. "And he was right there. Derek, he was in our home, Reynold, for birthday parties, team barbecues. We let him in." Reynold held her tighter. Neither of them could escape the guilt. A doctor finally emerged. "Mr. and Mrs. Mercer," she said gently, "we've completed the initial exam." She led them to a private room and explained the results. It was worse than they imagined. Aiden had suffered repeated trauma. There was infection, malnutrition, old and new bruises across his back and limbs. And beyond the physical, the emotional wounds would need years of care, maybe a lifetime. As the doctor left, Officer Miller arrived, along with another detective. They waited respectfully before asking if Reynold was ready to give a statement. With Sarah beside him, he recounted everything, from the Cedar Ridge lead to the blinking Morse code to the discovery of the trapdoor. When he was finished, Miller spoke. They'd already begun questioning Derek, and the truth had started to unravel. Derek Maddox had once been a respected coach, professionally licensed, but under the surface, he harbored a deep resentment toward Reynold, toward how beloved he was by the kids, the parents, the community. Derek wanted obedience, control. He believed he was the better coach, the more deserving mentor, and in his twisted mind, he saw Aiden as a way to take what Reynold had, to build a life where he was the hero. But now, everything Derek built was crumbling, and for Reynold and Sarah, the journey was far from over. But their son was finally home. Derek had always pushed hard, demanded discipline, structure, results. He criticized Reynolds' approach, calling it too soft, accusing him of coddling the kids. But beneath that criticism had been something darker: bitterness, jealousy. He saw how the kids gravitated to Reynold, how they played harder, smiled more, believed more under his guidance. And in Aiden, Derek saw everything he envied in Reynolds' life: a bright, talented boy who was loved, praised, and deeply connected to his father. That envy twisted into obsession. Derek wanted to hurt Reynold in the most personal way possible, to destroy what he couldn't have, to take what he could never build for himself. "You took the team from me," Derek had spat during the arrest. "So I took your boy." The words echoed in Reynolds' head like a blade. He and Sarah listened in silence as Officer Miller explained how it had all happened. It had been after a big tournament. The same day Aiden vanished. Derek, acting as assistant coach, offered to pack up gear alone. Aiden, always eager to help, stayed behind. Derek lured him over to a separate vehicle parked in a quiet area, saying he had a new puzzle book to show him, Aiden's favorite. Once close enough, Derek used a cloth soaked in sedatives, likely sourced illegally, and within minutes, he was gone. No one noticed right away. The tournament had ended in celebration, kids running around, parents distracted. By the time they realized Aiden wasn't with anyone, it was already too late. Derek had disabled the closest CCTV camera and used a little-known utility exit to slip away. Quiet, clean, planned. And then, for 4 years, he controlled every part of Aiden's life. Through further investigation, police confirmed that Derek had occasionally taken Aiden, disguised, to Cedar Ridge. These trips were framed as rewards, a treat, but they were, in truth, a chilling reinforcement of Derek's control. The candy, the puzzle books, even the thermal blanket were tokens of obedience, not care. He used fear as a cage. He told Aiden the world had ended, that his parents were gone, that only Derek had saved him, that to survive he had to stay hidden and loyal. Aiden wasn't just locked in a room. He had been trapped in a false reality, one so deeply rooted that he'd grown to believe it. As detectives were still processing the horror, the waiting room door opened. Several boys from Reynolds' current soccer team had arrived, alongside their parents. The news had traveled fast. Maybe Sarah had called someone. Maybe the community simply moved fast when one of their own was hurting. The boys stood in silence, confusion and fear in their eyes. Then, one by one, they stepped forward. Whispers at first, then words, then tears. Coach Derek had touched them too, had said things that made them uncomfortable, had checked them physically in ways that didn't feel right. It hadn't been just Aiden. The detectives listened carefully, took statements, and with every word, their commitment deepened to ensure that Derek Maddox would never hurt another child again. Later that night, Aiden, now settled in a private hospital room, lay resting, pale and fragile, but safe. The storm outside had passed, and for the first time in years, he was no longer alone. Reynold and Sarah sat at his bedside, quietly holding his hands. Aiden stirred, his voice thin but clear. "Dad, I haven't played soccer in a long time." Reynold leaned in, tears stinging his eyes. "When I get better, do you think I can play again?" There it was, a flicker of light in the darkest night. Reynold squeezed his son's hand gently. "Yes, Aiden," he said, voice thick with emotion. "When you're ready, we'll play again, I promise." The road ahead would be long. There would be therapy, fear, anger, healing. The pain wouldn't vanish overnight, but the nightmare was over. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the hospital room, with machines softly beeping and hope rising slowly like the morning sun, a new chapter had already begun. A chapter of recovery, of resilience, of a boy rediscovering joy, and of a family, finally, made whole again.